You are bracing for the wrong AI story. Not the wrong technology or the wrong shape. You are waiting for the morning your job vanishes in one clean cut. And while you watch that door, a second version is already running on the same models in the same companies inside the building you work in. And it is quietly deciding which people there still matter. The entire difference between those two versions sits on one word, and I am going to hand you that word before. Here is the whole argument this video rests on, stated up front so you can start fighting me immediately. When machines make producing something nearly free, the expensive part stops being production and becomes checking, deciding whether the output is true, safe, legal, usable, and worth putting your name on. Generation is collapsing in cost. Judgment is not. So the real question of the next decade is not how smart the models get. It is where the checking goes, who is trusted to do it, and whether that person is you. That is the thesis, at 45 seconds instead of 5 minutes. Everything from here is me proving it, stress testing it, and telling you what to do about it. And before I prove it, here is the part that should worry you. The shift I am describing does not fire anyone. It just quietly decides whose approval still counts. And most people find out which side of that line they are on far too late. No fake timelines in this video. Where I am arguing rather than measuring, I will say so out loud. It starts on your desk, then it takes your team, then the institutions you depend on, and then it comes for something inside your own head that you cannot buy back. I close every loop I open. Layer 1 starts now. Layer 1, the desk. Almost nobody has a job. People have bundles of tasks that got stapled together and given a title. When a tool gets good at a task, the job does not disappear. The bundle gets restapled. And the tasks that survive are the ones where being wrong is expensive, and somebody has to be accountable for the answer. Which means the first thing that changes on your desk is not your workload. It is your role in the sentence. You stop being the person who produces the first draft and start being the person who decides whether the draft is allowed to exist. Writer becomes editor, analyst becomes auditor, coder becomes reviewer, designer becomes art director. Same person, different verb. And yes, the clean-cut version is possible. It is just not the one already happening to you. This is where most people quietly lose, because reviewing is harder than making, not easier. To check work properly, you need 3 things. You need to know what good looks like, you need ground truth to check it against, and you need the authority to say no. If you have all 3, cheap generation makes you enormously more productive. If you are missing any one of them, you are not an editor. You are a rubber stamp with a salary, and rubber stamps are exactly what gets automated next. So the practical move here is unglamorous. Get closer to ground truth. Picture 2 people signing off on the same insurance claim. This is a hypothetical, but hold it in your head. One has stood inside the building after the flood. She has smelled it. She knows what the waterline looks like when the damage is older than the storm because she has been wrong about exactly that before and had it come back on her. The other has a folder of photographs and a generated summary that reads beautifully. Both of them sign. Only one of those signatures is worth anything the day it is challenged, and only one of those people is hard to replace. That is what contact with reality buys you. The customer on the phone, the machine on the floor, the site, the case file, the thing that only exists inside your organization and never made it into anyone's training data. That is what turns your sign-off into something more than a formality. The people who solved this problem best were not in tech. They were in a profession where signing off on work you did not do yourself can end your career. And they wrote down exactly what it takes. Here is the rule they landed on. Because once one person is checking, instead of making, the bottleneck moves. and it moves somewhere nobody budgets for. Layer 2, the team. Watch what happens in any organization adopting this stuff quickly. Production capacity goes up fast, review capacity does not. The documents, designs, analyses, and pull requests going into the system multiply, and the number of qualified humans who can meaningfully approve them stays exactly the same, because you cannot hire senior judgment on a 2-week lead time. So a queue forms. And when a queue forms, organizations do one of two things. The losing move is to relax the standard. Approve faster, skim more, let the volume win. That works beautifully right up until the first expensive mistake, and then it works never again. The winning move is to rebuild the review layer on purpose. Decide which decisions actually need a human, make those humans fewer and better resourced, and let everything else through on an explicit written risk tolerance. So notice what that does. The competitive advantage stops being who can produce the most and becomes who can approve the most without being wrong. That is a completely different org chart. It rewards people with taste, domain memory, and the nerve to reject things, and in most companies, those people are currently invisible in the metrics. And if you do not run a team, this is still your problem, because the queue is what decides whether your name or a model's output gets approved first. If you do run a team, the question worth asking this quarter is not which tool to buy. It is, what are we now producing faster than we can check, and who is on the hook when one of those slips through? Now here is where it stops being about your job, because everything I have described so far assumes the record is real, and that assumption is a load-bearing wall in every institution you depend on. Watch what happens when it moves. Layer 3, the record. Somewhere in the next 2 years, you will be asked to prove that something happened. A payment, a promise, a photograph. And the artifact you reach for will not be enough on its own, because the person on the other side of the table will look at it and ask the obvious question: how do I know you did not generate this? Multiply that one moment. Courts, insurers, hospitals, all of them are machines for deciding what happened based on artifacts, documents, images, recordings, signatures. Every one of those used to be moderately expensive to fake convincingly. That is the assumption under pressure. The realistic consequence is not that nothing can be believed. It is a shift in what belief rests on, from does this look real to can this be traced. Provenance beats appearance. Where something came from, who handled it, whether it is signed, whether it matches a record that existed before the dispute. That becomes the standard, and the institutions that already work this way adapt fastest. The honest version of this section is that we are early and the standards are contested. What you personally do about this is boring and effective. Keep originals, keep timestamps, keep the chain of custody on anything that could ever be disputed, and get comfortable asking not, is this real, but what is the trail behind it? Which leaves the one layer you cannot outsource, delegate, or subscribe to. Layer 4, the self. This is the layer nobody sells you a tool for, because there is nothing to sell. It is also the only one that is genuinely irreversible, and I think a lot of you are 2 years from crossing it without noticing. Judgment is trained, and it is trained by producing things badly and finding out. That is the uncomfortable loop, the skill you now need most. Knowing what good looks like has historically been built by doing the exact work that is now cheapest to hand off. If you skip every first draft, every rough calculation, every bad version, you may never build the taste required to evaluate the good ones. So this layer is a personal policy question, and I think it is the most important one in this video. What will you refuse to delegate on purpose, because doing it is what keeps you able to judge it? Keep one part of your craft handmade forever, even when it is slower, because the day you cannot do it, you cannot judge it either. Before you look at any generated output, spend 30 seconds writing down what a good answer would contain. Otherwise, you will grade the output against itself, and it will always win. And keep a running log of the times you accepted something you should have rejected, because that list is the only honest mirror you have, and it is the fastest way to calibrate. So back to the fork I opened at the start. Which trajectory do we get? Here is my straight answer, and it is deliberately unromantic. It is not one decision made once by a lab. It is 4 decisions made continuously at 4 different scales. What you sign off on, what your team approves, what your institutions accept as proof, and what you keep practicing by hand. The doom version and the good version run on the same technology. They diverge on who kept the ability to check. Now, the strongest objection to everything I just said is obvious, so let me answer it before you type it. What if verification gets automated too? What if models get good enough to check each other? And the bottleneck I built this video on quietly dissolves. Here is my honest answer, and I am arguing here, not measuring. Models can already check each other on tasks with cheap, fast ground truth. Does the code run? Does the number reconcile? Does the citation exist? On those tasks, I expect the bottleneck to dissolve, and soon. But that is not where the money or the liability sits. The expensive decisions are the ones where ground truth is contested, private, or physical, where the answer lives in a negotiation, in a locked system, in a building someone has to walk into. A second model does not have access to any of that. It has access to the first model's output. 2 systems agreeing is not evidence. It is a correlation with a confident tone. That is my case, and it is the part of this thesis I am least certain about, so the next video is the strongest argument against me, made properly, with the evidence on both sides. Subscribe if you want that when it lands, and in the comments, tell me the one part of your work you would refuse to hand over and why.